Curious, but he has found some answers that many Sark fighters are searching for by using CBD or cannabis oil and changing his diet to protect his gut.
There's thought and evidence that a gut imbalance can lead to autoimmune issues.
Coming up, Ryan will talk about his heart condition and how the application of functional medicine working on bacteria in the gut and a wee bit of CBD oil have changed his life for the better.
This is the Sark Fighter Podcast, living with sarcoidosis and other rare diseases. Here's your host, John Carlin.
I call this the Sark Fighter Podcast because I'm fighting Sark, and so are you, whether you're a caregiver, whether you're a patient, whether you are a researcher, and I've heard from all of the above since we started this podcast just about going on 1 year ago as I sit here recording today in January of 2021 here. Now, if there's one thing that I have heard time and time again as we look forward to today's interview, and I have felt this myself, it's this notion that there's nothing you can do to fight back once you find out you have sarcoidosis. And today's guest says, well, wait a minute, there actually is something you can do. Ryan Norenberg he has cardiac sarc, and you're going to hear him talk about how as it got worse and worse, and of course at first he didn't know what it was, but he just couldn't do everyday things, couldn't carry the luggage in from the car without being winded and that type of thing. And eventually he was diagnosed, and he does a great job sort of giving us a step-by-step description of his story. But then once he found out he had sarc, he explored some avenues that I think people would like to do. I've heard it over and over from people I've interviewed here on the show and through other SARC patients that I've talked to through FSR. But people want to do this, but you can't get a clear direction on how to do it. There really aren't any clear answers, and it's hard to know if you're on track or maybe just kind of blindly following something that sort of sounds like a good idea, like, maybe I'll go gluten-free because, I'm eating too much wheat or wheat-related things, and maybe that's what's making my body flare up or swell or making me feel uncomfortable or, whatever it is. But you don't really know, right? You just don't know. So Ryan went to a functional medicine doctor at the Cleveland Clinic, looking at things like the microbiome. You're going to hear him talk about that, and you'll hear him talk about how agricultural diets have sort of evolved over the last 10,000 years and how maybe some of our bodies just aren't ready for all the wheat and all the corn and these different things. And as a result, we sort of reach this imbalance, and you can get some of that balance back. Maybe you can get all of it back. I don't really know. But Ryan has had a great deal of success, and his wife, who I'll talk about later, has become a certified holistic nutritionist, and she has been advising him as well as his functional medicine doctor and so forth and so on. So he's going to talk about that today. And then the reason I think I like this is because, okay, there's another reason for hope, and it's a little bit more of a course that we can look at or that you can listen to and see where somebody has had some success with it. Then Ryan also has started taking CBD oil. That's the oil that comes from the marijuana plant, from cannabis. It's not something that makes you high, but it does give a lot of people relief in many different ways. And he's doing it, and he's willing to talk about it. And it's the first time that he's talked about it publicly in a forum such as this. Joining me now is Ryan Norenberg. He's in Pensacola, Florida. And Ryan has had a great deal of success in treating his SARC condition with both dietary changes and with CBD. And we're going to talk about both of those today. So, Ryan, thank you and welcome to the Sarc Fighter Podcast.
Hi, John. Thank you for having me.
So let's get into your sarcoidosis story first of all, before we talk about some of the things that you've done that I know a lot of folks, myself included, are considering. How did SARC first present to you, and what is your ongoing battle with sarcoidosis?
So it all started in 2014. I was 37 years old at the time. Uh, I would say late summer, early fall. I started having symptoms that at the time I didn't realize were symptoms, but they're similar to what your other cardiac sarcoid guests have talked about. Lightheadedness being the main one, and it just kept happening and getting worse. There was a trip my wife and I took to the North Georgia mountains in September. We were about to have a baby in November, and we wanted to get one last trip out of the way before I had to travel out of the country for a week or two. So we were doing that. As I was carrying our suitcases back in the house, I about passed out. And these aren't huge suitcases. I just carried 3 or 4 of them in, and man, hands on the knees, bent over, just about to black out. I was like, that's weird. I had to go to it was a Sunday night. I had to go to a work dinner with some Brazilian guests that we had in town. We were doing a project in Brazil. They were doing some training here. And then the following week, I was going down there to Brazil to work with them. And so that night, I had gotten back and was watching a Monday night football game, and my Saints were losing. And I was sitting on the couch and my heart started racing. And I was like, oh, yeah, I don't like losing, but it's not that bad. I thought I was just nervous. And
right.
That's the first time I'd noticed, anything with the heart. And I really didn't think much of it. In hindsight, I kind of remember that happening. I need to go see a doctor before I go to Brazil. I don't want to get sick down there. So I couldn't get into the doctor. And so I just left and went, maybe I need to eat something. I went to go get some lunch. And as I was driving, I almost passed out in traffic. So I basically drove right to my parents' house, who lived in the area, and called my doctor and said, I know, when you call him, you say, oh, well, we could see you next Tuesday. I was like, I need to see someone now. And I'm gonna come sit in the waiting room and see me when you can see me. And they did. And the doctor saw me. He listened to my heart. He took a chest X-ray, and he said, something doesn't look right. He said, I hear a little abnormal heartbeat, and your chest X-ray shows a little haziness. Not sure what's going on, but I want you to see a pulmonologist and a cardiologist. And they got me in pretty quickly. And so I went to a cardiologist and a pulmonologist the next day. The cardiologist did an echocardiogram, the ultrasound of the heart. And they had called me back Wednesday and said, your heart function is abnormal. And they checked me in, and they start trying to take my vitals. And the guy said, hey, do you feel okay? And I said, no, absolutely not. And I looked, and my heart rate was about 250 is what was registering. And I was in VTAC, and or ventricular tachycardia. And he went, he said, I need to go get the doctor. And he went and got the doctor, and they came back immediately. And she checked me out, and just immediately kind of bent down and whispered in my ear. She said, you're in ventricular tachycardia. We need to defibrillate you immediately. So they defibrillated me, got me out of that arrhythmia. And I'm like, okay, something is wrong with me now. I was diagnosed with myocarditis. They thought that I had a respiratory infection around August of that summer. And they thought, hey, sometimes you can get a viral infection in your nearby organs, and it can cause inflammation of the heart. And we think that's what's going on. And a lot of times this happens in 3 or 4 months, you'll be fine. Your heart function may return to normal. So that's kind of how it started.
So all of that leads to, I'm assuming, finding some sort of a heart blockage, and it's sarcoidosis. How did you jump from there to what it really was?
So it wasn't, there was no blockage. So when they did the heart cath, they found zero blockage. It was just inflammation of the left ventricle
Okay.
of the heart. Sarcoidosis was actually talked about. One of my pulmonologists, when that doctor had taken the X-ray they sent me to, he suspected sarcoidosis. So it was the first time I'd ever heard of it. And the other, well, we don't think so. You just don't fit the bill of a sarcoid patient. They did an ablation. They did a mediastinoscopy to pull some of that inflammation out of my lungs, or they tried to get some what we thought might be granulomas on my lymph nodes, and they did a biopsy, and they came back and said it was negative. They checked for sarcoid and said it was negative. So they ruled out sarcoid and went in and did the ablation and gave me the ICD and pacemaker and said, you're at risk of having these arrhythmias forever.
So Ryan, they eventually figured out it was sarcoidosis.
They did. So
yeah.
So we made arrangements and went up to the Cleveland Clinic, and it was August of 2015. And up there, they diagnosed me with sarcoid. I'd seen a pulmonologist, a cardiologist, and actually an infectious disease doctor. The pulmonologist up there had diagnosed me with sarcoid.
But the pulmonologists tend to be the leads because that's where it shows up the most. So you went through prednisone, methotrexate, all that stuff?
Yeah, so at the Cleveland Clinic, they immediately put me on 40 milligrams of prednisone, methotrexate, and Remicade.
And did that get it under control?
Well, it helped. So, that was, August of 2015. Went back March of 2016. It had improved but not gone away. So they said, hey, this is a great improvement. Let's continue tapering that prednisone. Let's get you down. They're telling me all the bad things it does with bone density loss and all that stuff. We tapered the prednisone, tried to come down. When I came back to the Cleveland Clinic the next time, a few months later, the inflammation was back, and it was back pretty good. And my doctors, that's when I'm talking to the cardiologist. I'm like, well, what does this mean? Because when I was first up there, like, hey, a lot of patients have this. We give them the medication and it goes away and you never see it again. And he said, there's really three types of sarcoid patients. There's those, it comes and it goes. There's those where you just have to treat it forever, keep it under control, manage it with the drugs. And then there's, the third group that, a lot of things aren't effective, and, it's just a big struggle for those people.
You're in the third group.
No, he said I felt like I was in that middle group.
Okay.
Prednisone seemed to be very effective to me. It seemed to be the one thing that when I was on it and continued on it, it would clear up. As soon as I started taking the prednisone away, it would come back.
So you started looking for alternative options.
Yes.
Which I think all of us who fight SARC would like to know what those options are. Every time I ask a doctor, they're like, yeah, dietary changes don't work. You're just going to have to accept that you can't do as much. But you started doing dietary changes.
What I did, I started seeing the functional medicine department there at the Cleveland Clinic. At the same time, my wife is just all over the nutrition stuff. She's been telling me, look, you need to go gluten-free, dairy-free. And I was already doing some of that stuff. And when we went, so after this September 2016 visit where the inflammation was back, really got serious about the diet. The doctor at the functional medicine clinic, which, I would recommend anybody to go see a functional medicine doctor. What these doctors do, they understand the human body, the systems, what different levels of blood tests, things like that. And he validated a lot of everything my wife had been telling me. And for some reason, it just seemed validated coming from a doctor, but it was a lot of the same exact stuff. It's hard when your wife's telling you, don't eat the pizza, don't eat this. And
Right.
it's,
Well, that's, some of that is common sense. And what I know that I'm looking for and what I've heard from other people is you're looking for somebody who understands the whole system.
That's right.
And so you kind of intuitively know just from our culture that pizza is delicious, but it's bad for you.
Right.
But when a doctor says, oh, well, that breaks down into this molecule, which gives you this result, and that's why it's bad for you, and you have this particular condition that exacerbates that, then that's makes it worse for you. Therefore, you should avoid pizza. We're picking on pizza, and pizza is one of the things that if I eat pizza, I know I'm going to feel like crap for 2 hours.
Right.
But your functional medicine doctor said, yeah, don't eat pizza and don't eat a whole bunch of other stuff you're going to tell us about, right?
Well, it was, and he was explaining why. And, what the first thing we talked about in there is we talked about the gut and the importance of the microbiome in our intestines and gut. And, I'd always heard, hey, take probiotics, they're good for you, but I never really understood why or what. And, my wife had recommended a book for me to read, The Good Gut. And it explained how, the microbiome in our gut is, decreasing generation after generation. If you go back to our hunter and gatherer ancestors in Paleolithic times, humans we're a product of evolution. Going back to apes essentially. We're millions of years of evolution, and you look modern agriculture as we know it, with the heavy grains, corn, soy, and wheat, most of which are our main agricultural crops, at least in the U.S. This started about 10,000 years ago. So that about 10,000 years ago, the human diet started converting to, these agricultural crops, less diversity. And then over time, our cultures also become more sanitary, right? We brush our teeth every day, we take showers every day, things like that. And we're not going to stop doing that. But you combine that with, the lack of diversity in our diet, the processed foods, and the heavy antibiotics that we all take through our lives for various reasons, and the antibiotics in our food system and the meat that we eat, the glyphosate on the GMO crops that we eat affects the microbiome in our gut. And you get this microbiome out of whack, and things happen. And so that was one of the first things we focused on was getting the microbiome right through diet, understanding what's good for it, what's bad for it. We had already been eating, mostly organic foods, especially the meats and vegetables.
How do you know when your microbiome is right?
We actually took a test where it was a test kit that I took home, and I had to send in a stool sample to this third-party lab. And I was out of whack. I wasn't the worst, it wasn't terrible, but there were some certain types of bacteria that were low that should have been higher, and I guess a little bit of the stuff you want lower, so that was it. But some symptoms are just bloating, GI pain, anything abnormal in the gut, you can feel it, and there's thought and evidence that a gut imbalance can lead to autoimmune issues.
So you talked about probiotics. When you go to the health food store and you buy probiotics, are you buying lots of different bacteria that you're going to take, or are you buying one?
I'm taking one type, and I think it's a blend.
It is a blend. Okay.
I'm taking the one that the Cleveland Clinic had recommended. Therabiotic Complete. I buy it on Amazon now.
Really?
Okay. It's about, I want to say it's about $90 for a 3-month supply. Another piece that I learned about that I take very seriously now is the omega-6 to omega-3 ratio. And I would recommend anyone just Google omega-6 to omega-3 ratio. And what you'll see is, again, going back to the evolutionary stuff, human beings, we evolved on a diet that had a ratio of about a 1-to-1 omega-6 to omega-3. And omega-6s are, we need our omegas. We need both of them. It's not like omega-6s are evil and omega-3s good. But the problem is in our modern American diets, we get way too much of the omega-6. And, they say that the average American probably has a 10-to-1 ratio. And when that ratio is heavy on the omega-6 side, our bodies are in an inflammatory state. And we're susceptible to all kinds of diseases, cancer, autoimmune, you name it. Inflammation is the root of most, if not all, diseases.
So where do you get omega-6 from? Cookies?
So yeah, processed foods.
Processed foods, right?
A lot of the lower cost foods like the vegetable oils, soybean oils, safflower, sunflower oils, those type of oils, peanuts, pork has a lot of omega-6 fat in it. The omega-3s, on the other hand, the best source of it is fish. And then there's some plant sources, walnuts, flaxseed, things like that. But the EPA and DHA, which are, those are only available in the animal proteins of fish. So I take a daily fish oil supplement every day. There's health food stores. The supplement industry is a huge industry. And, we even found ourselves, there's a lot of stuff that's anti-inflammatory, tart cherry juice, turmeric. And I kind of got into taking a lot of different stuff. And I was like, look, it was getting expensive. Like we need to figure out what really matters, what's really important. We got the guidance of our functional medicine doctors. And, my thought is, I'll talk about the CBD in a little bit. That's a supplement I take, but fish oil and probiotics are essential to me and will be something I take forever. I feel that those are worth my money, worth my time.
So you started doing all this. Did it work? I mean, you're taking fish oil and what was the other supplement you said was really important to you?
Well, the CBD, the probiotic.
Probiotic, right? And so that started helping your heart.
Well, not. Who knows what's helping what? I'm on a lot of heart medications. I'm still on prednisone at this time, methotrexate at this time. So I started taking CBD. When I went back to the Cleveland Clinic that fall and got that bad report, I was something's got to happen. We ramped up my diet compliance. I'm going to do everything I can to get my body in the best shape, best condition as possible to fight this disease. And, I think just going after inflammation in general, an anti-inflammatory diet, what causes inflammation? An imbalanced gut, visceral fat around our abdomens, the excess insulin in our body causes inflammation. It was weird. I know a lot of people gain weight on prednisone. I actually lost 25 pounds because I gave up grains. I wasn't drinking beer. I was eating meat and vegetables and more vegetables than meat. And, the weight just kind of came off, giving up all the wheat and starchy carbohydrates. So anyway, at the same time, I started taking the CBD. I'd done a lot of research on it, read about it, read how the endocannabinoid system in our body is pretty fascinating. So I had a friend in college whose daughter is now epileptic. She was a young girl. This was a few years ago. They were in the news because he was on the forefront of helping push the legislation through the state of Florida, promoting medical cannabis legalization. Because I saw when they were talking about this getting legalized in Florida, I saw the list of qualifying conditions, and many of them are autoimmune, and multiple sclerosis, rheumatoid arthritis, lupus, and it said or like conditions. I was like, well,
Mm-hmm.
sarcoidosis fits in that family. Let's dig in. And so I called him and I said, you know a lot about this. You've been fighting the battle and taking care of your daughter. What can you tell me? And he sent me a website, The Realm of Caring, and it's a nonprofit organization based out in Colorado whose mission is to educate patients and doctors on the use of cannabinoids for therapy. I'd kind of always thought that cannabinoid therapy was based on the THC side, right? Making people feel better through the psychological effects of it. And what I realized on that Realm of Caring website that he gave me, he said, go to the research library. There's a link there, and there's a list of all kinds of medical conditions. I think they have every condition in the world besides sarcoidosis listed.
Of course.
And he said, just start reading different things related to your disease and see what you find. He said, I do know that it is an anti-inflammatory because epilepsy is a form of inflammation in the brain. So it does have anti-inflammatory effects. And I do know that it's effective for autoimmune, but I don't know much more than that. Go dig in. And so I did. So I went to that Realm of Caring website, and I was looking at, there was no sarcoidosis, but I was reading about inflammation, autoimmune, things like that. And what I found is that, our bodies have an endocannabinoid system in them. And what that is we have, we have receptors in our body. We have CB1 receptors, mainly in our central nervous system. And that's the receptor that the THC in the cannabis reacts with to give the psychoactive effects.
Mm-hmm.
We have a CB2 receptor in our body that's in our immune cells. And that is the CBD or cannabidiol interacts with the CB2 receptor to modulate the immune system. And I read these technical articles. I don't understand a lot of it, but typically what I do is I read the abstract or the summary, and I get the gist of it. I saw some commonalities in these articles that cannabidiol acts on the CB2 receptor. It downregulates cytokine production. It reduces inflammation. I read an article about fibrosis showing how it's a tissue protectant and reduces fibrosis and oxidative stress. I was like, wow, this reduces anxiety. I was like, this sounds like the perfect drug for me. And really no known side effects. So what I did is I talked to my doctor at the Cleveland Clinic, my pulmonologist, and I sent her some of that research. And I said, hey, I would like to start taking this. I want to experiment with it. Would you mind looking at these articles and tell me if you think they're legitimate? Are they credible? Let me know what you think. And she said, yeah, give me a couple weeks. And she got back to me a couple weeks later and said, these are legit. It's very interesting. She's like, I wasn't aware of this, but if you're comfortable with it, let's give it a shot. And
so where do you go? How do you know? Because now cannabis is exploding onto the market, right?
Yeah.
And so again, there's some of it's probably a good product, and some of it probably is something posing as a good product, or it's not as clean. It's not whatever percentages they try to break this down to. So how do you get to the product that works?
So the Realm of Caring is a good resource, but I chose the brand Charlotte's Web. That's the one that my friend's daughter took. That's the one that you've probably seen on the news or Dateline or all that over the years. But the company's called CW Hemp. It stands for Charlotte's Web. But anyway, you do have to be careful. It's a big industry out there, and hemp is a bioremediator, which means it absorbs, what's in its environment, toxins that may be in the soil, and it stores it inside. So hemp is actually used to clean up toxic fields and things like that. So the last thing you want to do is, buy some from an unreliable source that's cleaned up a field contaminated with lead or whatnot.
Hazmat site, yeah.
It's an unregulated industry. With that, though, there's also questions on, is it legal? Is it legal in my state? CBD is. In 2014, the federal government they were pushed to, hey, there's a difference between hemp and marijuana. And they kind of pushed the federal government to draw that line of distinction. And where they drew it is at 0.03% THC. So anything below that minuscule threshold is hemp, and anything above it is federally illegal as marijuana. So CBD can be in both, is in both, but you can get CBD on the lower end of that threshold. And that was in 2014. That distinction was made. At that, it was made available for sale and legal, but the laws were still a little bit gray. In 2018, in the Farm Bill, the government basically explicitly stated that CBD, in hemp oil with less than 0.03% THC is legal for sale and distribution throughout the United States. So that can be purchased and obtained without a prescription, without a doctor. You could probably, in most cases, go down to your health food store and buy it.
And are we talking about a pill that you take or an oil that you rub on your skin or both, or what? Because it seems like it presents in a lot of different ways.
Yeah, I take an oil, and my fish oil I take as an oil. I think that's the most pure way to get it.
But it's a pill. It's a pill that you take as an oil.
It's like a dropper, like a 1 milliliter. Put it straight in my mouth and hold it under my tongue for a little bit, 30 seconds, I think it says, and then I swallow it. Okay. And I'm taking, when I was sick with sarcoid, actively flared, I was taking 300 milligrams a day. So it was expensive. Insurance doesn't pay for it. At that time, I was spending about $500 a month on it, which was, again, I wouldn't do it if I didn't think it was effective. But I started taking that in September, went back to the Cleveland Clinic in March, and had my first absolutely clear PET scan. No inflammation in the body anywhere. When I had my first PET scan, it was in my heart, lungs, liver, lymph nodes, bone marrow. And then on prednisone, it would improve and then come back. When I got off the prednisone, did this back and forth a couple times, and really got on the diet, started taking the CBD, and it cleared up.
After doing a whole bunch of stuff that included prednisone and the traditional treatments, what you have found is that CBD made the big difference. That was the changing factor.
Yeah, it did. Another thing it allowed me to do, this whole journey, I was just a nervous mess. I couldn't focus at work. I couldn't sleep. I, was just depressed and anxious and all of it. And, when I started taking the CBD, I had to, for a while I was on anxiety medicine, really just to get to sleep because my heart's pounding and I needed to relax and get to sleep. And I was able to quit that and got off the anxiety medicine, felt a very good sense of well-being, felt like I was in control of something. And then the diet piece, my wife was just, she had become passionate about this. She's since left her career in academia and has become a holistic nutritionist and is opening up her own practice, helping me. And, I've become very interested in this nutritional stuff. And, there's a lot of misinformation out there, and it's not just junk on the internet. It's our, what our government is telling us, our food pyramid. There's different ways to look at this. And I would say doctors are a lot like politicians, the right and the left and in the middle. I don't want to get on a government tirade here, but there's other influences there with economy and lobbyists and things like that affect, you know, what is a heart healthy food, or what the Cancer Society approves and things like that.
Right.
I mean,
right.
they have Honey Nut Cheerios as a heart healthy food. I mean, give me a break.
Right. So you're still doing the anti-inflammatory diet, and you're doing CBD oil.
That's right.
And are you on any other drugs at this time?
Oh, I'm still on. I've completely come off prednisone for 2 years now. I've been completely off methotrexate. That was a tough decision. I'll talk about that in a minute. And we've reduced my Remicade from every 4 weeks to every 6 weeks. And I've been sarcoid free now completely for 4 years. There was a mishap in there. So I started taking the CBD. I had a clear PET scan, 5 months after taking it. My next one, 6 months later, was clear. Went to go to the next one 6 months later, felt great, was going into Cleveland. Went to go see LeBron and the Cavs play. That was exciting.
Wow.
We were just enjoying this trip because it wasn't as stressful anymore. And went in and got the PET scan, and my heart was full of inflammation, worse than it had ever been. But the doctor said, this is just peculiar. It looks peculiar. It's only in your heart. It's not, it looks weird. I can't explain it, but, I don't know. She's like, we have to assume it's sarcoid, but it's something's weird about it. So anyway, I'm devastated. I thought I was out of the woods. I thought that I'd been pretty mentally strong through all this, but I started to crack this, even though my doctor at the beginning said, hey, this is a roller coaster. Anyway, at this point, I went to see a counselor because it was, I was to a point where I hated my job that I knew I loved. It's just, I didn't want to go there. I didn't want to do anything. I was just kind of emotionally dead. And I was like, I can't heal this way. This isn't. And what I realized there is the impact of stress and the mind over matter. I felt great. And as soon as the doctor told me I was sick with sarcoid, I felt sick. It was like, I have a chart. I can look at my PVCs, and they spiked. Like, they went from, a relatively low rate to, a high rate just in minutes, and they stuck there. And it was night and day just from being told I was sick again. And so I realized what the mind plays in all this. And I kind of got into, with the counselor, started talking about meditation and ways to just kind of relieve that stress. One of the things that she told me, that she's like, this is going to sound ridiculous, and a neurologist would probably tell me I'm a clown, but she said, do you ever tell your body to heal? And I was like, well, what do you mean? She's like, well, how do you move your fingers? I was like, well, I don't know. I just kind of think about it and they move. She said, well, why don't you tell your body to heal your heart like you move your fingers? It's like, what's it going to hurt? Yeah, it sounds corny, sounds cheesy, but anyway, it was something to do, right? So when I'm sitting there in bed and my heart's pounding and I can't sleep, I would just lay quietly and kind of in my way meditate and tell my body to heal. Like, just try to actively send that energy and heal. And I don't know if it did anything. It kind of made me feel better. Again, it kind of made me feel like I was doing something myself to contribute to this. But anyway, so saw the counselor, several times, eventually picked myself back up and said, okay, we're back in action. We're going to just deal with whatever comes our way. Went back to the Cleveland Clinic and was clear again. And at this point, we had a conversation with the doctor, and so what was so peculiar about that previous test? And then I told her, I don't know if you've ever had a PET scan, but they give you a strict diet to follow the day before.
Okay, yeah.
And then you have to fast. And the diet is basically no carbohydrates, high fat, protein, kind of a ketogenic diet. Bacon, I guess avocados, eggs,
right,
stuff like
right,
that.
right.
Not a terrible diet. It's food I enjoy eating. But anyway, we were in Cleveland the day before, and we went to a Mediterranean restaurant. And this was before I knew as much about nutrition and different foods as I know now. I ordered like hummus chicken. I thought, oh, hummus is protein. It has olive oil and fat. What I didn't realize is, how many carbs are actually in, the chickpeas or garbanzo beans. It is a source of protein, but very high in carbohydrates. And I had eaten that the day before. And when they asked me when I went to take the PET scan, did you eat carbohydrates? I said no. And anyway, we did the PET scan, and long story short, we think that was a false positive now, because of the fact that I ate those carbohydrates. And when you do the PET scan, before the PET, you get injected with a radioactive sugar solution, and then what they're looking for is that, I guess, the glucose uptake in the areas of inflammation. And having those glycogen stores in my body from the carbohydrates, we believe caused the false positive test. So as far, assuming that was false positive, ever since I've been on the CBD, I've been free and clear.
Just in the interest of time, I want to move forward. You are up and around, you are working, you like your job again.
Yes.
Can you hike? Can you play beer league kickball anymore? Can you do all those things?
Honestly, I can do it all. I jog about daily. We just took a 2-week trip out to Colorado this summer. I hiked, had the baby in the backpack going uphill. I'm not going to go out and run a Ironman triathlon, but I can jog a couple miles. I can play tennis as long as anyone wants to, and I can walk forever. Miles and miles and miles. And other than extreme exertion for extended periods of time, I feel like my life is very normal. My quality of life has been restored better than I expected. My life is happier, and I feel better than I ever have.
So, and you've accomplished that then with sort of a combination of what I'll call Western medicine, which would be Remicade, and then the sort of Eastern approach to health, which is, I'm assuming you're trying to stay away from inflammatory foods like grains, and then you're taking the CBD oil.
I take 100 milligrams daily.
And that's just from a dropper. And you're using the Charlotte's Web brand, the CW hemp.
That's right.
You're not feeling better because of some sort of high. You're feeling better because there's a receptor in your body that is using the CBD in a way that reduces inflammation.
Exactly. Right.
But as we part ways, then somebody's listening to this and they're seeing that hope that we talk about. What would be the first thing that you would suggest that somebody do to kind of follow your path?
You have to get your mind right. You have to think positively, and it's hard to do when you're in that miserable, scared, dark place. But you have to somehow get through that and say, hey, I'm going to roll with the punches. I'm going to take what comes to me, and I'm going to meet it head on and do whatever I can do to beat it. And, I think you go after the gut, get that in shape. I think that's a fundamental part of our underlying health. I think you take action to reduce overall inflammation in your body. Mind the omega-6, omega-3 ratio. I think I highly recommend CBD, but I think it's been very effective for me. I'm going to continue taking that. And then find the diet that works for you. People don't know, and we eat foods and cook foods that are very good. Good tasting, wholesome foods. Eating healthy isn't always eating like a rabbit. I think finding ways that you can have a healthy, sustainable diet. It's about the lifestyle.
Thank you, Ryan. I really appreciate it. I'm sure the listeners appreciate it. And